Something has happened to Robbie Wolfe since he took over for Frank Fritz. Fans have been really mad. So why are they so upset? Let's look at what happened step by step and tell you the real story about Robbie Wolfe. Robbie Wolfe took Frank Fritz's place as the co-host of American Pickers. Before that, Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz were the main stars of American Pickers for many years. Their friendship on TV, their jokes with each other, memories they shared, and the way they worked together after knowing each other for so long was what made people love the show. But there was something else that viewers liked, too. Robbie was already someone people saw on the show sometimes. At first, he only showed up once in a while. But people saw him more as Frank appeared less and less. When viewers saw the brother connection on camera, people reacted in different ways. Some people thought it was nice to keep it in the family, while others thought it was unfair. Favoritism. And this is where Robbie's trouble started. The show's ratings dropped badly, and people said it was Robbie's fault. How is Robbie to blame for American Pickers losing viewers? Before we explain how, let us give you some background information. It all started in 2020 when Frank Fritz, who had been on the show for a long time, stopped appearing on American Pickers. Fans were really surprised. They wanted to know what happened. Frank had been Mike Wolfe's partner on American Pickers since the very first episode. And for him to just disappear like that, fans thought something bad must have happened. But fans hoped that Frank was going to come back. Then came the really bad news that hurt everyone. Frank was not going to come back. But why? And how does this have anything to do with Robbie? You're about to find out. When they announced that Frank wouldn't return, it made fans who had loved watching the two of them together for over 10 years really angry. For many people watching, Frank wasn't just someone who co-hosted the show. He was what made the show special. Sure, Frank was a bit rough and didn't have the smooth style that Mike had, but what he didn't have in smoothness, he made up for with unexpected kindness and great chemistry with Mike. Frank was the perfect opposite to balance out Mike's energy. And for the viewers, not having Frank was going to be a huge loss. At first, the story was that Frank had to leave because he was sick, but then people started hearing rumors. Yes, Frank did have health problems. He had a really bad back injury that wouldn't get better. All the heavy lifting of objects he had been doing on the show over the years had hurt him badly. Frank dealt with the pain for a while before he decided to get surgery. It was while he was getting better from surgery that Frank faced a serious problem. To help him deal with the pain while recovering, Frank's doctor gave him opioid pain pills. According to Mike Wolfe, the opioids worked way too well for Frank. Mike said Frank got addicted to them, and this addiction hurt their friendship. The two of them hardly talked to each other anymore and slowly just grew apart. However, Mike said he wasn't going to give up on his friend that easily and told everyone he got family and friends together to try to help him. But Frank refused to listen. The drugs had taken complete control of him. Mike said as time went on, Frank's addiction got worse. The way he acted changed and got worse, and his friendships with people fell apart. According to Mike, the same man many people loved on TV started disappearing behind pain and drug problems. So, according to Mike, the people making the show couldn't count on Frank anymore, and they had to fire him from the show and bring in Mike's brother, Robbie. However, fans don't agree with Mike at all. They have said he was a horrible friend to Frank. They wonder why Mike waited until after Frank died before he started talking about Frank's drug problems. They said he was willing to say anything to help the show get better ratings, even if it meant saying bad things about Frank. They even said they would stop watching the show because of how Mike was treating Frank's memory. The pressure on Mike and Robbie started to get really intense. But here's where things get really surprising. Frank does have an addiction problem. So, were Mike's claims about Frank actually true? In July 2021, Frank told the Sun newspaper that he had a drinking problem. At first, Frank ignored the problem and just threw himself into his work. But after his back surgery, Frank realized something. He wanted more out of life and wanted to live longer than his mother did. His mother died from a disease that was caused by alcohol. His mother wasn't the only family member who was addicted to alcohol. His grandfather was addicted too. Frank checked himself into a treatment center in Iowa for 77 days and stayed sober for 11 months before he drank again briefly. The fact that he was so honest earned him sympathy from fans. So fans think if Frank had been addicted to opioid pills, he would have talked about that too. Would he have? Or had his opioid addiction taken over him like Mike said? Or was Mike trying to make Frank look bad because of the shocking thing Frank told everyone? Frank revealed that he and Mike didn't talk to each other for 2 years. He said Mike didn't even check on him after the surgery. Could this be true? Is what Mike said about Frank a lie? However, that wasn't the most shocking thing Frank revealed. Frank talked about the real reason he was kicked off the show. Frank didn't give all the details, but it seemed like Mike wasn't comfortable with how popular Frank was getting on American Pickers. Frank had a special charm that viewers just couldn't resist. They loved how hard he worked on the show and how he made things funny. The viewers thought that Frank really cared about what he did on the show, and it wasn't just about making money for him. Frank knew the history and story of every item he found. And for the viewers, it was a fun way to learn things. However, based on what Frank suggested, it doesn't seem like Mike liked this, even though the show focused mostly on Mike. When Frank started eating healthier and lost weight, it seemed like Mike had a problem with that. There was one more shocking thing that Frank said. He thought that Mike had done things behind the scenes that got him removed from the show so Robbie could take his place. Frank said clearly, "I think Mike wants to get his brother Robbie in there to replace me." That quote got repeated everywhere. The idea that a beloved co-host was being pushed out while the host's family member got ahead felt like a betrayal to many viewers. Mike said this wasn't what happened, that it was Frank's addiction making him say things and not the real Frank talking. In July 2022, Frank had a really bad stroke and never fully got better. The happy storyteller ended up in the hospital many times after that stroke. Finally, he died on September 30th, 2024, when he was 60 years old. After he died, fans asked whether Frank had been treated fairly when he needed time and kindness. People's emotions got even stronger. For many fans, sadness mixed with suspicion and anger, and the person all these feelings were aimed at was Robbie. Robbie was feeling the heat, but Mike didn't help make Robbie's situation any better. Mike said Frank's comment about their friendship made him reach out to Frank, and he forgave Frank. Was Frank really lying? Whatever the truth was, Frank's presence is still felt on the show and haunts it. The viewers even now miss his laughter, funny comments, and emotional honesty. He managed to build a connection between the TV screen and people's hearts. Now that he is gone, fans hold on to his memory and compare everyone who comes after him to him. Frank has left behind a huge shadow, and that shadow has completely covered up Robbie. Can Robbie get out from under this shadow? A lot of American Picker fans think Robbie doesn't belong on the show. Robbie's critics watched the episodes with Frank in them and the ones Robbie co-hosted. They decided that Frank was warm and friendly, and that warmth was important to the show. They feel Robbie, on the other hand, is just too stiff and acts like he's only doing business. However, that's not the only bad thing they say about Robbie. They think Robbie only got the job because of favoritism and that he doesn't care enough. They say Robbie doesn't know about antiques the way Frank did. But what does knowing antiques really mean? For Frank, it was a mix of real-life experience, knowing tons of weird and rare things, and a personality that let him be both honest and gentle with sellers. Frank knew the story behind items. But for Robbie, his background is different. Robbie came from a business background. He had a landscaping and restoration business. His experience shaped how he acts as a picker. Robbie is often shown making deals, moving items, and running the operations. Fans who loved Frank's special storytelling style see Robbie's style as just business transactions. And in conversations online, the simple way to describe it becomes less of a picker, more of a dealer. That description has completely hurt Robbie's chances as American Picker's co-host. But things didn't stop there for him. His critics say he is boring, and they say Robbie has had awkward conversations with customers anytime Robbie is careful about how much money he offers. Critics say he's being cheap. They even claim Robbie pushes harder with sellers and say it is because of this that the show has lost viewers. To them, Robbie would always be an example of what not to do as a picker. Is that fair to Robbie? Robbie might not have Frank's ability to tell interesting stories, but he is living his best life as the co-host of American Pickers. As a child who grew up as the youngest of 3 kids in Bettendorf, Iowa, Robbie Wolfe often describes himself as a kid who couldn't sit still. He wasn't the best student, and the people who saw him when he was a teenager thought that Robbie wasn't going to be anyone special, let alone a TV star. But Robbie had one thing, and that was a wild imagination. His mother understood this and gave him the freedom to explore and let his curiosity run free. That wasn't the only thing she gave him. She gave him and his siblings what they needed to live a good life, even if it meant giving up things for herself. Robbie put his imagination to good use. In his mind, he was Huck Finn, floating down a river on a raft, discovering hidden parts of America. Well, he would become something like that because that adventurous spirit stayed with him. While his mom let his imagination run wild, His grandfather, William Wolfe, who was a junk collector on Chicago's South Side, pointed him toward something else, collecting junk. His grandfather collected toilets, doors, and other things in his yard. He taught Robbie to appreciate everything. Robbie took that lesson seriously. He even took it further than his grandfather expected. Unlike his grandfather, who bought things thinking about how much he could resell them for, Robbie bought and collected things because they caught his attention. While his end goal was to eventually sell things, Robbie didn't rush anything. He didn't care how long it took. As long as he liked something, he would keep it. If someone comes to buy it, that's great for that person. And if no one comes, Robbie is happy, just looking at the item. Is Robbie truly not just interested in the money? Have his critics been unfair to him? There is an answer to these questions. Robbie decided to follow the path of collecting junk. But Robbie had a plan. But before that, let's show how Robbie bought a 3,122 square foot house with 4 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms in 2017. He spent around $335,000 on buying that house. On the business side, he bought more than 6 acres of land for $80,000 around 2020. He bought a piece of land next to that property, which used to be an auto building in Davenport, Iowa, for around $200,000. In March 2021, he made repairs to the building, fixed plumbing, upgraded wiring, turning it into a working warehouse for vintage vehicles and collectibles. Robbie spent a huge amount of $25,755 on those repairs. Next to the store, there is a small piece of land where Robbie stores vintage cars and really big antiques. Robbie wasn't just storing his antiques for no reason. He restored them. He has worked on neon signs, motorcycles, classic cars, gas pumps, and vintage trailers. You name it, he probably has fixed it. His life is all about vintage items. No wonder he feels so comfortable on American Pickers, even if his critics say he looks out of place. However, Robbie might really be too focused on business. He doesn't care too much about making things look beautiful. Robbie's restoration approach focuses more on making the object work rather than making it look perfectly restored. The things he worked on might not be pretty, but Robbie didn't mind as long as they worked. In Robbie's experience, for serious buyers, that's actually a good thing. But there's not much in terms of stories with that kind of approach. Robbie might not know how to tell stories, but he is living in one, and he says he knows stories are important. This was something he learned as he got older. He grew to love learning about the stories of people, their family, and objects. However, if he loves stories so much, why didn't he learn to be a better storyteller? Or is he better at it than critics are saying he is? Robbie says that he is passionate about picking and he wants to leave behind more than just his picks. So he has shared tips on how to be good at it, and he has advised pickers to be good with people. He says that the best picker is the one who listens to the stories people tell about their things. To Robbie, it's not just about seeing what's valuable. It's understanding memories, emotions, and family history. A dusty old chest isn't valuable because of its price, but because of who touched it, how many people owned it, the stories that are part of its wear and tear. Yet, critics argue that this doesn't turn into dramatic storytelling in front of the camera, at least not like Frank did. But Robbie has kept sharing his advice for pickers. He criticizes pickers who treat old items purely as ways to make money. In his 2025 interview with Koval's Antique Trader, Robbie spoke about the Rust Belt Americana show and its charity part. The event happens across multiple states, bringing car and antique lovers together. The money they make supports scholarships and classroom grants for working-class students and teachers. So Robbie is saying that people should learn to give back to the community. He sees his actions as teaching by example, but he doesn't want to be praised too much. He only wants to build connections and relate to other people. Isn't this similar to what Frank did? Like Frank, Robbie says he is always on the road. Roughly 10 days out of every month, he is searching through barns, meeting sellers, looking at items, and negotiating prices. Dealing with bad weather, car breakdowns, missed phone calls, and stressful negotiations are all part of the job. The camera shows the finds, but rarely shows the phone calls he misses, or the nights he lies awake wondering if he paid too much. Apart from all of this, there is loneliness, being tired, and not knowing what will happen next. It's almost like he is fighting for every mile, and in a year, sometimes Robbie drives about 50,000 miles looking for new finds. That constant movement could be what many fans and critics see as tiredness or stiffness on camera. Imagine being on camera when your body is exhausted. It would show on your face. If every discovery comes with a tired body and unpredictable schedule. Is Robbie really living a dream life? Even filming is hard work for Robbie. He thinks trying to capture his finds on camera makes his work extra hard. The cameras would follow him while he dug stuff out of barns, garages, and basements. What usually took him 6 hours became 12 hours. And despite these longer hours, it's not enough to get 42 minutes of TV. They need 300 hours of filming in 100-degree heat. They sometimes have to do 6 different filming sessions with different people at each session. Sometimes he didn't even want the cameras to follow him, but that is the life he has signed up for. Again, is Robbie really living his dream? Despite the cameras, Robbie still keeps his friendship strong. They buy from him, and he also buys from them, too. Robbie understands how important it is to keep bonds with people, or does he? According to him, their crew has become like family, and they even treat each other like one. Their camera guy and sound guy has been with them since season 1. Now they are over 24 seasons and still don't look like they are going to split up soon. The only important person that seems to have left them is Frank. But even with him gone, it feels like his presence is still haunting them. Robbie plans to spend many more years on the show, even if it means arguing with his brother from time to time. The two of them can be stubborn. Sometimes Robbie gets his way. Other times, Mike gets his way. At the end of the day, they try to look past their disagreements and make the best TV show they can. Robbie is having the time of his life, and it does look like the stress is worth it, because of the things he finds. One of his favorite finds that makes the stressful life of picking worth it for Robbie is when he found a 1941 Indian motorcycle in a basement of a 2-bedroom Michigan house. The house belonged to a World War II Air Force pilot who had built a plane in that basement and whose daughter hadn't gone down to the basement in 10 years. When Robbie explored the place, he found a motorcycle, scattered parts, and the body of a small plane. The house's back wall had to be removed to get the airplane out. In that moment, the object was less valuable than the story. The pilot's daughter cried as she talked about flights, family dinners, losing people, and war memories. Robbie says that's his favorite kind of find, where the old item can't be separated from the story. Robbie loves bikes. He greets motorcycles like old friends, and he doesn't just see bikes as machines. He sees lives, histories, and buys bikes to hear what they tell him. It's just that he can't tell the stories he hears from them.